We acknowledge the original owners of the land on which we podcast, whose stories were told for thousands of years. Today, we are recording in Meanjin. We pay our respects to elders past and present who may be listening. Sovereignty was never ceded. A quick note before we get started that there may be some swearing in today's podcast. If you don't like swearing or usually listen with children in the car, you have been warned. You're listening to What in the NDIS Now, a podcast where I, Hannah Redford, and my friend Sam Rosenbaum interview participants and providers about all things NDIS. Hello and welcome to today's episode. Today with me, I have Julian. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. A little bit nervous, but very excited.
I hope the nerves settle down as we get going. I'm sure it'll be fine. So our first question is always, where did you grow up?
So I grew up mostly in Canberra. I was born in Townsville, and then when I was 6, family moved down to Canberra. I was there until I graduated from university, and then decided I needed somewhere much warmer that had a beach, and so I moved up to the Gold Coast, which was very, very exciting, and that's where I've been for the last 9 years.
Ah, nice. I like that. Yeah, Canberra's cold.
Canberra's very cold, and yeah, it's you end up knowing everyone down there, so it was good to get away. Chose the Gold Coast because I did a placement there and just loved it, so thought why not?
Fabulous. So you're a physio.
Yes.
So tell me, how did you get into the disability sector?
So mine's probably I've been in the disability sector for maybe 2 to 3 years now. I started my physio journey as a musculoskeletal physio in a clinic. So that's where if you hurt your back or someone and you want to go see a physio, that's the type of physio I was to start with. I moved from one clinic to the next clinic, and the second clinic had an inbuilt hydrotherapy pool. And so that was my kind of introduction to working with people with disability. It wasn't so much on the NDIS, but it was people with a TBI or ABI, working with them within the hydrotherapy setting, which was really fantastic. After that clinic, I left the physio sector for a couple of years, working in work health and safety with a big crane company, very different. And then I came back to work in a bigger organisation that works within the NDIS and aged care and community allied health. And then earlier this year, I decided to take the bold move to go out on my own and become an independent physio. And so from about March this year has been when I've started Back2You Physio.
Awesome. And now you're hooked on disability?
Now I'm very much hooked. I've had a really enjoyable time meeting other providers in the sector, and then working with different individuals has been really rewarding and really exciting.
Yeah. And you're mobile, aren't you, predominantly?
Yes, yeah, mobile predominantly. I do have relationships with a few providers that have offered to let me use their rooms and things like that if certain people would rather me not come to their house and we go to a different setting. And that's been really good to be able to go to a different place and be able to use different rooms if necessary.
Awesome. So tell me about how physio sparks your interest, particularly I think in mental health.
Yeah, so I do work across all kinds of ranges in neurological and Parkinson's and MS, but where I got talking to a few people at some networking events, and yourself included, was I was just happened to be asked to help work with some people with schizophrenia. And then I was doing a lot more research into people with schizophrenia and their physical needs. And while I was doing that research, it just kind of shone a light on the physical side that's usually missed for this mental health. And it was just really interesting when I was talking to different people at these networking events. No one really had a full understanding, including myself, before I started doing the research around it. So that's kind of how I not got hooked on that, but it's how I
developed a bit of a strength and a niche for being really good at that.
Absolutely.
Which I think is also a specialization.
Yeah.
That's the word. So developing that specialization, I think is really awesome. What is some of the research telling us about schizophrenia and exercise?
So what I first discovered when I was doing some background research on it was that the negative physical symptoms that came from someone with schizophrenia and the increased in physical rate of illnesses that those people diagnosed with schizophrenia would have. So heart disease or strokes or diabetes. They were also found to have pass away 15 to 20 years before someone from the general population. But then going further into it and seeing where a physio or an exercise physiologist or a personal trainer could help with the exercise side of things, you actually started finding that you could help with those types of diseases and illnesses where if you exercise and you're healthier, you're less likely to have diabetes, you're less likely to have a stroke. But you also found that you improved their attention, their processing speed, their memory, and their executive function as well. So you actually helped the mental side as well as the physical side. So it kind of went across both, which was really interesting where this could actually be a therapy for them to help them for both sides.
That sounds awesome. And so what sorts of exercises are we talking about? Like, do we have to push massive weights or like, I know nothing about exercise either, but I'm just is it running around? What sorts of things are we talking about?
So you're looking at more, and it really depends on the person.
Sure,
so
of course.
if you have someone, and especially if we're talking about schizophrenia in particular at the moment, someone might not be that mobile, they might not have that much balance, and so they might not be able to do much as someone who is more mobile and more functional. But you're trying to make sure that their heart rate gets up, you're breathing hard. So if you or I were to go out for a fast walk or a jog or something like that, you're looking at finding that kind of exercise base or that intensity for an individual based on their base level capabilities. So a couple of people I work with, one person we will do, they struggle with their balance. So we'll focus on that first, and then we'll do a big walk around an oval to get the exercise component going. But it depends on their physical level and if they're carrying anything else, any pains or injuries as well, working around that.
Yeah. What other research have you found about this?
So it's mostly around, so what they found was the medications for schizophrenia, they can really help the biochemical side of things, but they're relatively poor at alleviating cognitive deficits. And that's where the exercise can come in. So what they've found in research is there's hippocampal deficits. What the hippocampus is a part of your brain that helps play a role in your memory, and then that's particularly vulnerable in schizophrenia. the exercise therapy can actually improve the blood flow to that area, and therefore you're improving your memory, you're improving other kind of executive type functions or to do with everyday life, making decisions, that kind of thing.
That's all really interesting. So we've talked about schizophrenia. What about for other mental illnesses?
Yeah, so I think there's a general knowledge in the world today that exercise is definitely beneficial for your mental health. And there's definitely some research around depression, anxiety, and general mental health. So with depression, it's not so much that if you're clinically depressed and you're in a depressive phase, it's not going to click the fingers and you come out of it. But they have found that exercise therapy can help prevent the next reoccurrence from happening. And then with anxiety, there's beneficial that like to manage anxiety levels and things like that. There has been some research around exercise therapy and exercise in general being able to help people manage through levels of stress and anxiety and things like that as well. I know even for myself, I am definitely a routine exerciser, and if I'm having a stressful week or anything like that, that it even helps me on those minor levels as well.
So that's an interesting thought. How many times a week do you exercise?
So personally, I will do 5 to 6 days in the morning for I like to do going to the gym, or I have a home gym, so going to my garage is my way of exercising. And then on the weekend, I'll like to do go for a surf. So it's more of a I also go with some friends, so it's a social type of exercise session where it's less about doing an hour straight of exercise, but also socializing and having fun as well. So for me personally, five to six times a week. But I think giving advice to other people of looking after their mental health through exercise, it shouldn't be that you've got to get up and you've got to do a 30-minute run or a 30-minute gym session each day or whatever, however many times a week. It's about finding what suits you. So it could even be you and your partner or you and a friend going for a walk in the afternoon and going for a 30-minute walk or something like that. That might be the right thing for you, just finding what works for each person individually.
Yeah, great. So we've talked about physio helping people with different mental illnesses, which is probably outside of what we generally assume a physio kind of does. Does it have to be a physio that does that?
No, definitely not. So for me, the mental health side obviously only takes up a very small portion of what I do, because physio and mental health is definitely not the most closely linked thing. But if there is someone listening who is looking after someone that has schizophrenia or something, it could be an exercise physiologist. It could be like a personal trainer that can be involved as well. My only suggestion would be if this person has some other comorbidities, if they've got some pain or injuries or anything else that might be interacting with them, that getting an exercise physiologist or a physio on board to start with, to at least design a plan that could be carried out by themselves or carried out by support staff, would be the recommendation there.
Yeah, great. And what is the main difference between a physio and an exercise physiologist?
I do get that question a lot. There's very, very similar in terms of the theory they learn. It's probably more the treatment techniques might be slightly different. So an exercise physiologist would first go to more exercise-based therapies, where a physio might use exercise-based therapies but might also be more hands-on doing either manual therapy or, for example, I see someone with MS, and we're working on their flexibility and things. So I've got my hands on and we're doing some different things like that instead of just the exercise-based therapy.
Ah, excellent. That's a very good explanation. Well done.
I hope so.
One of the things I've noticed in my work is sometimes when you go into a physio's clinic, you might only do the physio work when you're there. And even if they teach you exercises, it's hard to translate that back to home. And I even had a scenario where I had a client who lived in a really small house and just didn't have the space or even a backyard. Like there was just nowhere that even, stretching out really could occur. But they hadn't let their physio know that actually the exercises they'd been given just wasn't possible in their space. And I said, okay, how about we do one session where the physio comes out to your house, because they were nervous about having the physio in their house. And then the physio can then see your area and go, okay, and then modify the exercises. So I think it's really important that, our clients keep feeding back to the physio kind of what's going on for them.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think that's really important for not just the high level exercises. I think that's really important as well for maybe someone suffering from Parkinson's or someone suffering from peripheral neuropathy, where they might actually have a balance or a falls risk. Because to give someone a balance exercise or something like that to improve their balance, you've got to kind of give them an exercise that challenges their balance, but in a safe manner. So when you're not there, you need to know that where they're doing it is a safe environment. So if you go to their house and you could set them up so they're in a corner or something like that, and they have benches around them, so if they slightly stumble or fall, you know that they're going to be safe and they're not going to end up falling over and hurting themselves and going to hospital or something like that. So even, from the area point of view of someone being able to do those exercises, but then taking that into other areas of physiotherapy where it might be a safety risk as well, is very important.
Another scenario I often have, and I try to promote with a lot of my clients, is you can only see the physio or exercise physiologist once a week or once a fortnight or even just once a month. Sometimes you just don't always get the funding that you want. And so what I try to encourage is that physio to teach the support workers, so the times that they can't be with the physio, they are able to do those stretches safely because they've got the support worker with them. So when you're teaching support workers how to help the person do their exercises, do you sometimes try and get the whole group of support workers that are surrounding that person, or do you prefer to do it like one at a time? What's your strategy?
So I would prefer doing, to be honest, as many as I can get at once. So if I could get everyone that would be seeing this person through the week, that would be brilliant. Quite often I will only be able to talk to the support worker that's on the day I'm there, and then I'm relying on my stick figures or word of mouth or other written things to help progress it over. But if I could get more support workers there, it would be better. Yep. Because you can, whatever the exercise is, and I've had this with a client just this week where I got to show the support worker exactly what I was doing. And then as a physio, you're trained to look at certain body parts and movements, and we're trying to promote back to normal mobility. And so my eyes are focusing on certain things, and I can then tell the support worker, in this particular exercise, here's 2 points that I want you to be focusing on. Maybe they're doing a certain movement and I want their knee to be in a certain position. So being able to give that information directly to a support worker is brilliant. So having more interaction with the team is the better. Just unfortunately, you can't always get all the support workers at the one time.
No, I do understand that. So that's great. For my youngest child, one thing we tried to do is I asked the physio's permission, but I just filmed it on my phone so that we could then watch it to do it later, because I find the stick figures too difficult to follow myself. And so I think that's another avenue people can use to make sure that everyone understands what needs to be done.
Absolutely. I think that's a brilliant idea, using, especially if you're looking for something that the person themselves can't see. Maybe you're looking something at behind them in a particular exercise that you can show everyone else this is what you're looking at or what you're looking for, and then everyone can just see it, because written word can be taken any different way. And then even that's really good, because I might be showing you an exercise to look at for one of your children, but you might not remember the two things I've told you next time you go do it. But if I'm describing that in a video, then you can go back and you can hear the voice and you go, okay, they're the two things I'm looking at.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I did it, because I knew when I got home I will have forgotten, not because I'm not paying attention, but almost sometimes because I'm almost paying too much attention, because I'm so focused on like, do it right.
Yeah.
And you almost forget the other bits that people have said.
Yeah. So the big thing
awesome.
with that kind of thing is, and that's why I think the really good physios as well, or exercise physiologists or OTs, they'll bring it back to maybe one or 2 points. You might be teaching someone. So again, I'll go back to the example of a participant that I'm seeing with MS, and we're relearning to stand to sit, and there is maybe 6 or 7 or 8 things that he's not doing correctly right now, but I'm choosing 2, and that's what he's focusing on. That's what the support worker is focused on. You don't need to care about it all, because if you're trying to focus on 8 things, you're not going to do any of them right. So it's just the 2 important ones, and then once you've nailed those, you can add extras.
I think that's such an awesome way of doing it, because they're still going to see you at some point, right?
Yeah.
And so if, say it's during the week, they're practicing their sit to stand, and then they get back to you, you can focus on all 8 or 9 different things, but during the week, if they're practicing those 2, then by the time they get back to you, they've nailed those 2. You don't have to focus quite so hard on those 2, and then it's the next 2.
Yeah. And a lot of especially if you're looking at stroke, or where you're trying to retrain the brain and retrain movements, the person's focusing so hard on all the things they need to fix. So if you can learn something and it starts to become a little bit more automatic, then you can actually take that focus away on something else. If you're trying to focus on all 8 at one time, you're not getting enough attention on any point. So you want to try and it might not even be a week. It might be, I might come back and see someone every week or every fortnight, but it might not be for a month or 2 months that we stop focusing on those 2 and we move on to the next one, because it started to become automatic.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about hydrotherapy and how that works?
So I love hydrotherapy. I think it's very underutilized. So hydrotherapy is in a pool that's usually 32 to 33 degrees. Most only know because we're based here in southeast Queensland, but most public pools now have smaller indoor swimming pool that is that correct temperature, has a ramp, and so it's fantastic for hydrotherapy for people of all ability. But what happens is when you walk into the warm water, you become lighter. So if you're standing in the water and the water's about up to your hip, you're gauging that there's about 50% less weight on your feet. If the water's up to your chest, there's only about 20 to 30% of weight onto the feet. And so you can do a lot more movement with people that can't stand as much, but also within any type of movement that you do within the water, you're pushing against resistance. So you're strengthening with any movement that you're doing in the pool as well.
Yeah, that sounds logical to me. That's great. So our final question of the podcast is, in your ideal world, what would the future of the NDIS look like?
So I've kind of got two answers to this question.
Awesome, tell me.
The first one is there's a lot of discussion around the NDIS and the amount of money and funding it's taking up. And I do not know how this could happen, but if there could be less funding required for kind of the reports and the evidence needed for the therapies. So I know OT reports are quite huge, and even physio ones that aren't as big as OT reports, but they can take a number of hours to complete, and that's funding that we're taking away from therapy that would actually be improving someone and capacity building them, rather than just giving information back to the NDIS. So I don't know how to do it, because they've obviously got this in place for a reason. Throwing it out there with kind of no care, no responsibility. But if there could be a way to reduce the amount of spending that we have to do on someone's package on the admin side versus what we could actually deliver therapy-wise, would be amazing.
Absolutely. So I love this because I completely agree. It's all about you have to have so much evidence. And if you could just, write like a page or two about this is what the person has done, this is how they're improved, this is why we need more of it, done. Just give us the funding for it, and don't require a ridiculously long report just so you have the evidence for like that. It's frustrating.
It certainly is. And it just especially for any kind of therapy, whether it's physio, exercise physiology, speech, OT, you're usually someone to get improved, they need to be doing something 3 to 4 times a week. So if you could go back weekly and then update and check everything's going well and things like that, you can then provide more guidance instead of going back monthly, and maybe for a whole month they've been doing something incorrectly, or in a month's time in 2 weeks' time they might have got bored and they stopped doing some things and they've dropped off. But just being able to give some more to the therapy side of things, because that's what the whole aim is, to capacity build someone. And so to take that away for just report writing is frustrating sometimes.
It also frustrates me because the funding, what they pay in funding doesn't go into a black hole. It pays people like you and me, and then we pay taxes and we spend our money that puts money back into the economy. And so I get really frustrated with people talking about like this funding black hole, because I'm like, no, that's not what it is at all, because the NDIS pays predominantly for services for humans, and humans buy things and pay taxes, and so it's not a funding black hole. It's so frustrating to get people to understand this.
No, that's very true, and I do love that point.
So what was your second one?
Oh, the second one was just a more collaborative approach. So I think a lot of the time each person caring for someone, we're working in silos a little bit too much of the time, and just having a better collaborative approach, just picking up a phone, having a 5-minute phone conversation about, from an OT to a physio, oh, this is what I'm thinking of doing, this is what I'm thinking of doing, how can I help you meet your goal in my sessions, and how can you help me meet your goals in your sessions? Because I might be working on one thing, but while I'm working that, an OT might be working on organization or scheduling. And so I can make the person do a little bit of that within my session to organize and schedule or something like that, just by doing my normal therapy with a little twist to it. And then they're getting twice or 3 times as much benefit.
And that comes back to C.1, because if you had more time and more funding, people would be more willing to collaborate. People, at the moment, I think people are resistant to doing anything that looks like they're doing something for free. And I can understand this to a point. I think sometimes people take it too far. But anyway, the other thing too, I think is really important is those stakeholder meetings with all of those therapists together. And that, again, costs a whole lot of money, because even if you keep them 1 or 2 hours, every single one of those people are charging $193.99, plus your support coordinator, plus your support workers. Then that session is a huge amount of money. So it would be I would love to see there be money for those stakeholder meetings put in.
Yeah.
But certainly, like, in my practice, the way I do it is definitely to try and get everyone talking to everyone else, as much as possible. I mean, it depends a little bit on their support coordination funding as well, because I don't always have the time to say, hey, this is this, this is this.
Yeah.
But I try to, and definitely a few of my high-end needs people, I'm better at getting everyone to collaborate. I think that it would be good if it could be done more often with even some of my teenagers, because I do think they don't get nearly as much funding. And so I probably haven't been as good at getting OTs and physios and everyone else to collaborate, just based on not as much support coordination funding. So
but I don't think it's always down to the support coordinator. So where I've worked really well in the past, and I don't know why, but it's when an independent is working with a participant with multiple independents. For some reason, we talk more than if it's a company, and I'm not sure why, but it just seems to happen that way. But as a therapist, you're driving from session to session, and after a session, for some reason, me and this OT, when we were needing to just have a quick catch up, it's just usually on your drive anyway, so you're not wasting any time. You're driving to somewhere else, and just on the phone to have a quick chat of, this is what I'm working on, what are you working on, how can I help you? And it's like a 5-minute conversation. It doesn't need to be charged. And I think it could be more therapists to therapists as well, just take that initiative.
Yeah, cool.
I don't think it always has to be down to you, the support coordinators. You have a lot on your plate.
Thank you for recognizing that. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's been so wonderful to talk to you. So until next time, thank you. Thank you for listening. Please share with people you know. Until next time, as the Green Brothers say, don't forget to be awesome.